Hello, everyone. Thank you for attending our very first webinar. So, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are. Just wanted you to see that there are some real people behind this before we get started. Okay, now we're going to jump back to the presentation. Okay, so first of all, would like to thank you so much for attending. We're so excited to see people from the US, Canada, Western Europe, and Asia. So hello and welcome. So as this is a very first webinar, if you see any technical glitches or anything like that, I hope that you forgive us for that. This will only improve with time. Okay, so we will focus on this webinar. We'll focus it on using an API to connect HR applications to users' calendars. So for your reference, we're seeing representatives of all kinds of HR tech companies, and some of you make HCM solutions, talent suites, coaching solutions, and others are in the recruitment industry. We also have a good mix of current users of the Cronofy Calendar API. So that's who's attending. And for those of you who are not in the HR tech space, don't worry, don't feel left out. We invite you to take the examples that we will highlight today and think about how you can apply them to your own business. Okay, so by way of introduction, I'm John, I'm head of sales, and we'll present this webinar along with Adam, who is co-founder and CEO of Cronofy. So this webinar will run for 30 minutes. We will leave plenty of time for questions at the very end. So you'll see a chat there on the GoToWebinar panel. Please feel free to use that. You can just send us your questions via the chat. My colleague Jeremy, who heads up our marketing, will be looking out for those questions, and then we'll fill them out to us. Okay. So this is today's agenda. So we will start with the vision behind Cronofy and explain why we went off to create the very first unified calendar API. We will also provide some examples based on current uses of the API by our clients, and then jump straight into a demo. It will be then time for questions. Now, some of you might be wondering what we mean when we talk about a unified calendar API. So to put it really simply, it is a piece of software or middleware that sits between your application, website, or platform, whatever you're going to call it, and users' calendars. So I will now just switch over to Adam to hear, so that you may hear more about the vision.
Thanks, John. We set about building Cronofy really to solve that kind of age-old problem of how can I make commitments all over the internet and have them appear in my calendar, and likewise, how can I surface my availability so commitments can be made for me wherever I am. And this is really at the root of what we're doing here, is that the smartphones are all pervasive, and the calendar exists on every smartphone. It's the calendar is the tool that people use to decide what they're going to do. It's kind of there's that window on their future, and unless we can link our applications into the calendar, we can't enable people to make those decisions. But unfortunately, I'm an ex-engineer. I've tried this before. I've been through that pain of trying to navigate calendar integration, and it's not just about the data mapping. It's all the other issues that John will describe later. And so really what we've built is this facility that allows you to connect your app to any user's calendar without any of the kind of development overhead and the burden, but also be sure that it's reliable, and it allows you to start thinking about the calendar as an interface into your application, a platform upon which you can build interactions. And this is really, we've seen this shift already in terms of messaging. And we see what's happened with chat, and chat being it's kind of this key access point, enabling new types of interactions with applications. We can see it with maps, and with what Google and Apple have done with their Maps APIs and opening those up. The one core app that sits alongside those two on every smartphone is the calendar. And it's our mission to make that available to you, to enable you to build those interactions and allow users to make decisions. So to give you an idea, a simple thing, holiday booking. As an employee, I'm going to make a decision about when I want to take my holiday based on a number of factors, not just my own availability, my own workload, but also my colleagues' availability and whether or not they're on holiday, whether they're in meetings, whether they need me. The decision I'm going to take is going to be taken in my calendar. Without that calendar linked to my absence booking system, my HR system, I then have to go to the HR system and make the booking and go through the process and request all the things and all the approval flow comes through. In the Cronofy world, I just draw the holiday I want in my calendar, and then that happens automatically. And likewise, if at some point I realize, actually, I don't need the holiday, or a meeting comes in and I can't take that holiday, the decision, I take that decision in my calendar, so I should just delete that holiday from my calendar, and that in turn represents, makes all the changes required in the HR system. And this is what we're talking about when we talk about user-centric HR systems. It's actually making your HR system and the interactions required to work with it centered on where the user is, and the calendar is where the user is an awful lot of the time.
Thank you for that, Adam. So I will now talk about the reason why we set off to create the Unified Calendar API and why we think it's especially beneficial to the HR industry. So if you look around for a tool or a solution that can help you connect your HR application to users' calendars, you won't find a better option than Cronofy. No one else has really figured this out. And that is because calendars are really, really hard to integrate with. And these are the top 3 reasons that we want to discuss today, but there are many more. So it's fragmentation, sync, and privacy. And I will get into detail for each. Now, with the fragmentation problem, so people use different calendar services. So you have Google, iCloud, Exchange, Office 365, Outlook.com, and the list goes on. These calendar services are not owned by the same vendor. So that means that each calendar speaks a different language. To connect to your customers' calendars, you have to build separate integrations for each calendar. So basically, to do this, you need a team that is dedicated only to calendar integration. And this is really expensive to do, usually in-house. Now, even within HR applications, you have the concept of a calendar that is completely separate from your regular calendar. But who enjoys booking stuff on the HR system calendar and then jumping back onto their professional calendar or personal calendar, or sometimes both, to update them with the exact same information? Now, I'm thinking that you're all thinking nobody wants to do this. So this is when information also gets lost and you end up with 2 different sets of conflicting information. So that's really the fragmentation problem. The second issue, which is really the hidden problem of calendar integration, is sync. So how do you reconcile item updates across systems? So if I'm on my calendar and move the holiday that I booked 1 day forward, does the HR application automatically update? Answer is no. This is a hard computer science problem. The workaround that we see some of our customers relying on today is ICS feeds. So that's when you take a web address from an HR app and paste it into your calendar. Now, there are a couple of issues with this approach, but I'll focus on just one. So if you take Google as an example, you can have a 24-hour delay for an update. So this means that you won't have real-time information as events change. So this is a terrible user experience and obviously doesn't deal with last-minute changes. So for example, if an employee books a day off, their manager will probably want to know before that employee is actually back in the office, right? So that's the second problem, sync. Now the third issue, and this one is really huge, is that of privacy and security. The way things are now is that if a user grants access to your HR application, you can then see everything that they have in their calendar. So who they're meeting, where and when, and this is usually much more information than your app really needs. Now, maybe all you want to know is simply whether someone is available or not, so you can then book something in their calendar. But now you get access to all this confidential data that you don't want, but have legal responsibility for properly handling. So this is especially true in HR. I'm pretty sure that employees don't want the details of their medical appointments shared with an HR app. So those are only three of the top issues that, and we can't get into everything for brevity's sake. But the main point here is calendar integration is such a nightmare to deal with, and no one has, really figured out how to deal with all these technical hurdles in a nice way. So that is, well, no one except us. So at Cronofy, we are the first and only company to have put in the time and effort to figure this out. So what is the solution? It is actually quite simple. So what we offer is one single API for all the calendar services that are in use. So it doesn't matter what kind of calendar service the end users use. The Cronofy Calendar API will work with all of them. So that's the fragmentation problem that's solved. And then we provide real-time data and a bi-directional sync. So that is when a change happens on your calendar, the HR system is notified as well. So, and that's vice versa. So when there's a change in the HR system, your calendar is notified. So that's the synchronization problem that solves as well. Regarding the third problem, so that of privacy and security, Cronofy allows you to access only the data that you need to respect users' privacy. So if all your app needs is availability information and not the event details, then that's what it gets. Now let's jump into a few use cases that are made possible by integrating Cronofy's Calendar API to HR applications. I think this will just provide a good idea of what is possible. Okay, the first use case. Let's take the example of an HR manager who often uses both his professional calendar as well as HR software. So, as you know, it's hard to manage schedules in two different places. So that means double handling and increased risk of mistakes. So if the HR manager integrates the HR software with the Cronofy API, all events can be managed directly via his work calendar. The HR software is always notified of events happening in his calendar, and this means that there's no time spent updating the same information into different places. It's the first use case. Let's jump to another one, that of recruiting a candidate. So let's take, so the recruitment process, it involves aligning internal and external calendars. So talking about the hiring manager, the candidate, and maybe bookable resources like meeting rooms. So today the way that it works is, emailing back and forth until a time and meeting room are found. So that's how it's done. But with Cronofy, you can query your calendar. For example, so give me a time when hiring manager and the meeting room are available this week for 1 hour. Then what the Cronofy Calendar API will do is it will bring back some options that you can then immediately book via the calendar. So it simplifies the process. Okay, on to the next use case. Say an employee wants to book a holiday. So usually the process is employee asks manager for the time off. Manager says it's okay. And then the employee logs into HR app to book the holiday, which the manager then logs into as well to approve. Now, with Cronofy, via the holidays calendar, the employee simply creates an event. That holiday request is immediately pushed into the HR app and blocked off on all employees' calendars, or all those are concerned. Manager can approve, and then all the team members can see when colleagues are on holiday. It's really that simple. Okay, let's jump into the last use case for today. So the HR department, it often has to organize end-of-year reviews and trainings, but with no visibility over trainers' schedules, HR has to coordinate this process manually. So with Cronofy, trainers can share their availability, so free visit information, so HR can find a free slot. And then HR just simply selects it, and that pushes it into the trainer's schedule, trainer's calendar, as well as the employee. So there's no risk of double booking or having to reschedule at short notice. Okay, so I hope that those are 4 concrete examples that we have provided there, and I hope you're starting to get a good idea of what's possible when you start using customer calendars as an interface into your HR application. So I will just let Adam pass over to him and let him just do the live demo for you.
Thanks, John. So in true kind of demo fashion, but also because we're talking about user-centric HR, we're going to start in the calendar. And as many of you will recognize this application, the Google Calendar interface. And what we have here is Adam Bird at some company, but he does have a Project Titan review meeting today. And we can see that he has a holiday calendar, and that holiday calendar is connected into his HR application. And you'll see here that Tony on his team has a holiday pending approval, and Sarah has one already approved. So the Project Titan meeting, there's one on Friday and one on Tuesday. So before that very important meeting, what Adam's going to do is going to book himself on holiday. He wants to make sure he's not he's firing on all cylinders when it comes to that meeting. He thinks it might be a tough one, and he's got some stuff to do at home. So he puts that into his holiday calendar, and that's it. He's seen this availability slot between the two. That's when he's going to book his holiday. He doesn't clash with Sarah, and Tony's off all week anyway, but he can take time off at the same time as Tony. Now, interestingly, what's happening behind the scenes here is the Cronofy platform has detected that change. And it's detected that change, and meanwhile the HR system that has an authorization to access Adam's calendar has now been notified of that change. And so what we'll see here is we switch over to our rather glamorous absence booking system, Cron incorporated HR system and its list of absences. You can see the kind of records here of absences that are pending and approved. So I'm looking at this as, say, as a hiring manager, as the manager of the team, and I'm going to go ahead and approve holiday. I think everyone's done really well, and they should have their holiday. And yeah, I know Adam could do with it just a day off before that Project Titan meeting. So they've been approved, and that in turn has notified the Cronofy platform that those events need to be updated. And we see here that now those holidays are showing as approved. Now, unfortunately, this Project Titan meeting is being brought forward to Thursday. So Adam looked at his calendar and thought, you know what, I'm going to have to move my holiday. But hey, Friday's not so bad. I will move that to Friday, which that's what we'd like to do. Hey, actually, tell you what, I can't take Friday off. I'm just going to delete it. So all this decision has been done in my calendar. I've got too many other things to do. I can't take this day. I need to take Thursday off, but I need that meeting. So I'm going to make that decision then. I've deleted that from my calendar. And if we go back to the HR system, his holiday's gone. It's, behind the scenes, I'm sure you can imagine that while we're just, in this case, removing this absence from the list, there's flows that go on in there. There's approval processes or disapproval processes. And all that's triggered by a calendar event. So I just want to switch to another demo. We talked earlier about kind of interview booking, and so we switched to our interview scheduling demo. So we're in the Cronofy Incorporated ATS, or Applicant Tracking System. And again, treat me like a hiring manager, and I need to book an interview for a candidate. And on the interview panel are Tony, Sarah, and Adam, and I'm looking at their availability is linked into the application ATS system, so I know that they can do any of these 3 slots. So this is looking at next week, so I switch to next week, and lo and behold, yeah, Adam's free on the slots we're talking about on kind of Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday at 11 a.m. But client meeting's been moved forward. Now, this move can be Adam moving it. It could be the organisers move the meeting. It could be something else has moved this meeting. But importantly, that change could have happened by someone on their smartphone, from desktop Outlook. Who knows? The point is, the meeting's changed, irrespective of how it's changed. And like before, the Cronofy platform is detecting that change and is notifying the ATS that the availability has changed and it needs to recheck. And you'll see now, as you go back to this, the list of available times, that Tuesday is no longer available. Adam's required for this interview panel. He's got a client demo that has to trump interviews. So, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and book this right now because I don't want anyone else, just my slot to go. And there you go. This interview is booked. Now, this could be the hiring manager doing this, but it could quite easily be a view your application showing the candidate. And it's all about looking for the kind of optimizations where you can and how you want to streamline the process and remove the overhead from people's time. And just for completeness, there you go. Adam sees, and he's had no interaction at all with the ATS. He just now knows that he's got an interview with the senior product manager for the senior product manager role, and you'll see we look in the calendar report as well. We've added some information so you can see who the panel is, who the candidate is, what the role is, and links back to the kind of main application. He's had to do nothing. He's just had an interview scheduled in that fits around his time. Now, there's probably one more thing. There is one more thing I'd like to just kind of talk to here, and this is our new Enterprise Connect feature. One of the challenges with any kind of availability system is getting access and authority to access people's calendars. Now, when you're talking about personal calendars, yes, there's a kind of personal authorization process that people have to go through. But when you're talking about kind of an enterprise SaaS solution where this is during work hours and the information about someone's availability is held within the corporate Exchange server, Google Apps, or Office 365, the overhead of everyone authorizing their access to their calendar is unnecessary. So what we've done is we've allowed your application, allowed a sysadmin at your customer to give your application rights to the entire organization or a subset of the organization. So in the case of the interview scheduling demo I showed where Adam didn't have to do anything, the appointment just appeared in his calendar. He wouldn't even need to explicitly authorize access to his work calendar. The admin responsible can do that and enable your application to access the availability of anyone who needs to be involved in any interview panel. Sorry, John, I just wanted to cover that one off. We're quite excited about that feature.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Adam. Much appreciated that demo. That was helpful. Okay, so that concludes the presentation bit of our webinar. We will look at the questions that you have been sending to us throughout this session. Okay, first question, how does a user actually connect their calendar?
Shall I pick that one up, John?
Yes, please.
So the connection to the calendar is it's the same as authorizing Google or Office 365. If you've ever done that, this is what we've built. It's this idea that your application redirects to a page. There's a list of permissions you're requesting, and this is where we're slightly different, and then they can just authorize free busy information or access just to put things in your calendar. You can do it without having access to information. The user selects their calendar from the list, logs in, and then they're back to your application, and your application has the authority requested. The only difference being the Enterprise Connect feature, where it's an at admin level is authorizing a number of users at once, and the individual user doesn't have to be involved.
Okay, thank you for that question. Second question, how can I see how this works in practice?
So the simplest way actually is our calendar connectors. We built sort of free connectors into things like Evernote and Trello and Slack and Zendesk, really as a kind of demonstration piece of our technology, but they've kind of been quite popular and taken on a life of their own. So if you're an Evernote user, for example, you can go to the Evernote app marketplace. We'll have a link at the end of the presentation, and you can connect Evernote and your calendar. You can see the kind of authorization flow in place, and then you can use an application that creates you create a reminder in Evernote. It creates an event in your calendar, and you can edit them in both places, and you can really start to see that sort of two-way sync in action.
Okay, thank you for that. Next question. So what do you do when the delete of the holiday needs to be approved?
So in that situation, you may have noticed in the demo that when Adam sort of created that holiday request, it pre-pended pending to the holiday request. It kind of replaces event. So what you can do with behind the scenes, because you're kind of actually replacing and editing events behind the scenes, you could, if you wanted to, put the event back, but put in a kind of pending deletion or pending deletion approved within the calendar, or just send an email to the user that it's in pending. Whatever the normal flow is, the calendar just gives you another option for communication, and it's really up to you to decide whether or not it makes sense for the rest of Adam's team to know that his deletion request hasn't been approved.
Okay, thank you. I'm saying, how is Cronofy getting access to the candidate's calendar?
So again, that's back to you either the candidate approves explicitly. So there's a flow through which they go, they authorize, and they kind of log into their calendar. That in turn creates the tokens on our side, which we kind of give to your application, so you can access that through. It's a flow called OAuth 2 is what we use. It's the same that Google will use. So your application gets a token that allows your application to impersonate access to the calendar on behalf of the user, subject to the restrictions that they've given you. The same flow works for Enterprise Connect, but the authorization just goes through a different flow, a behind-the-scenes flow, but that's under the auspice of an admin for your organization. And this only really for organization connectivity rather than personal connectivity.
Okay, how do recurring appointments show on Cronofy?
So what we do with recurring appointments is we actually kind of expose them as a series of individual events. We indicate within the kind of plumbing of the API that they are recurring, but they kind of appear as individual events, so you can treat them as from a free busy perspective or a kind of a display perspective.
Okay, thank you for that question. What is the duration of this authorization?
So the authorization essentially lasts for as long as or until you revoke authorization. So the user goes through the kind of the flow, either through Enterprise Connect or through the standard flow. You get a token, and at some point when you no longer want access to that user's calendars, you revoke that token. So you kind of explicitly remove that. From a security perspective, though, actually what happens is that the token you get expires after a period, and there's a flow called a kind of refresh flow, which again is part of the OAuth 2 standard, which allows you to kind of refresh that token periodically to ensure that credentials don't go stale, and we're kind of not having credentials, lived credentials sort of out in the world and being used.
Okay, it looks like we have time for just one more question. So, private appointments also synced using Cronofy?
Yes, you can access private appointments. They are, because we go into the kind of API access, we have access to everything. it's up to your application, but they are up to your application whether or not you want to render those to the user, or indeed from a FreeBusy perspective, whether or not you wouldn't see the detail, but you would see someone's not available.
Okay, yeah. So thank you for the questions. We wanted to keep this session, just short and sweet, so seeing to the time. But thank you so much. If you want to see Cronofy in action, Adam talked about this, so you can use some of our free calendar connectors, so Trello, Slack, Evernote, Zendesk. Those would be good ones to try out. So this brings us to the end of this. So I'll ask you for just a quick favor. When this ends, there will be a 30-second survey to which you can respond. We'd really appreciate your feedback on that. So yeah, this was a great session, we think. This was our first webinar, and we're so grateful that we had so many people attending from all over the world. Now, if you want to get in touch with us, this session wasn't long enough for you, you have more specific questions, you can just reach out to us at john@cronofy.com. You can also ring us on those numbers, and then we can set up something that is specific for you, and we can get into your use cases. So yeah, we're really excited to see some of the great calendar features that you want to build into your own service. So thank you again for attending, and you take care now.
Thanks, Ed.